Welcome to the Deep Dive, the show built to give you the precise knowledge you need to feel instantly well-informed about the complex individuals and groundbreaking ideas that define our modern existence.
Today, we are focusing on a figure who operated at the intersection of extreme scientific rigor and just extraordinary personal adversity. Stephen William Hawking.
His life story really is one of total scientific dedication. He defied medical prognosis for decades while altering humanity's understanding of the cosmos itself.
It's an incredible narrative.
That's right. For this deep dive, we've gathered sources that span his entire singular life, beginning with his birth in Oxford in 1942. We'll trace his path through his pivotal academic roles, including his time as the director of research at the Center for Theoretical Cosmology at Cambridge.
And crucially, we have to talk about the 3 decades he held the Lucasian Professor of Mathematics chair.
Yes, an appointment he earned in 1979 and held until 2009. It's a post, previously occupied by Sir Isaac Newton.
Exactly. Our mission today is to move beyond the celebrity persona and distill the most important nuggets of knowledge regarding his key technical and philosophical contributions.
We want you to understand not just what he discovered, but
why those discoveries were so foundational, and the extraordinary personal context that made his work possible.
And when we talk about foundational breakthroughs, we are talking about science that, and this isn't an exaggeration, quite literally changed how we understand space and time.
Precisely. His legacy rests primarily on 2 pillars. First, his fundamental collaboration with Roger Penrose on the gravitational singularity theorems.
Okay, what did that prove?
It proved that the universe must have originated from a mathematical point, essentially confirming the Big Bang concept via general relativity.
And second, his most globally renowned theoretical achievement.
That would be his theoretical prediction of Hawking radiation. This concept posits that black holes, contrary to their name, are not entirely black.
Right, they leak.
They slowly emit energy and eventually evaporate. And this prediction was a major breakthrough because it bridged the vast separate worlds of general relativity and quantum mechanics. By the late 1970s, it was already widely accepted by the theoretical physics community.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're dealing with a brilliant life story, one that dramatically altered our fundamental view of the universe, all while the man at the center of it navigated a debilitating terminal disease for over 50 years.
That combination is truly unique.
To begin to understand the source of Hawking's genius, we really need to look at his family background, which was highly academic, but definitely idiosyncratic.
It really was. He was born during wartime in Oxford in 1942. His father, Frank, was a respected medical researcher specializing in tropical diseases, and his mother, Isabel, was an Oxford graduate in philosophy, politics, and economics.
So an incredibly intellectual household?
The environment was steeped in intellectual rigor, but it certainly wasn't one of luxury. The family was noted for being intensely intelligent, highly frugal, and, well, undeniably eccentric.
I've read about their house.
Yes, they lived in a large but famously cluttered and poorly maintained house. And, of course, the visual that often accompanies their early life is the converted London taxicab they used for family travel.
That image just captures their unique priorities, doesn't it? Learning and experience over material comfort.
It's such a fascinating stage.
It does. And Hawking himself noted that he modeled himself on his father's dedication to scientific research, but he drew a clear line about his own field of study.
He rejected medicine or biology.
Right, because they seemed too inexact and descriptive. He was looking for something that governed reality at the deepest level, seeking something more fundamental. He found that rigor and foundation in physics.
Yet, despite this intellectual heritage, his early academic start was, well, it was rocky.
He couldn't read at first.
He attended Byron House School in London, and later, humorously, or perhaps pointedly, blamed its progressive methods for him failing to learn to read initially. However, his latent aptitude for mathematics soon surfaced, and it was nurtured especially by his mathematics teacher, de Crontada, at St. Albans School.
And this is where we get the first clear glimpse of his unconventional mind and, his inherent ingenuity. In 1958, when he was just 16, he and a group of friends, encouraged by Tada, undertook this massive engineering project.
They built a computer, a rudimentary but functional computer.
Out of what, exactly?
They didn't have access to modern parts, obviously, so they scavenged. They used clock parts, an old telephone switchboard, and what other recycled components they could find.
The ability to visualize and construct a complex, logic-driven machine out of scraps that demonstrates an incredible practical understanding of physics and applied logic even at that age.
It really does.
And despite these flashes of brilliance and the fact that his peers recognized it enough to nickname him Einstein, he was not an academically successful student in the traditional sense, not in terms of grades anyway.
No, it's remarkable to note that during his 3 undergraduate years at Oxford, he estimated he studied only about 1,000 hours in total.
1,000 hours in 3 years.
That's his estimate. He relied heavily on his intrinsic intelligence rather than discipline.
That reliance meant his initial time at University College, Oxford, starting at age 17, was marked by boredom. He found the work ridiculously easy and felt lonely initially.
Which is a common pattern for extremely gifted individuals. If the challenge isn't there, they just disengage.
But he eventually found his niche by leaning into the social and physical side of things. He developed a reputation as a witty, popular member of the college, engaging in classical music and science fiction.
And perhaps most illustrative of his need for risk and intensity, he became the cox for the rowing team.
Right, cultivating this daredevil image by steering his crews through incredibly risky courses, narrowly avoiding accidents.
That lack of consistent study came to a head at the end of his degree. He was aiming for a first-class degree, which was essential for his desired graduate placement at Cambridge, but his grades were borderline. This made his final comprehensive oral examination the Viva high-stakes game.
And this story is legendary. He had to face skeptical examiners who were debating whether to give him the first he needed or the second he perhaps deserved based on effort.
And this led to his now famous moment of brazen self-confidence.
He recounted exactly what he told them, demonstrating his awareness of his own superior intellect, regardless of his work ethic.
He delivered an ultimatum. He said, "If you award me a first, I will go to Cambridge. If I receive a second, I shall stay in Oxford, so I expect you will give me a first."
The audacity is just incredible.
It is. The examiners, recognizing they were facing a rare intellect, and perhaps preferring not to retain him as a perpetually bored and underperforming graduate student, they awarded him the first-class degree.
It was a successful gamble that paved his way to Trinity Hall, Cambridge, for his graduate work in late 1962.
But that success quickly gave way to a crisis. Just a few months after arriving at Cambridge in 1963, at the age of 21, he received the diagnosis that would define the rest of his existence.
He had an early onset, slow progressing form of motor neuron disease, MND, also known as ALS.
And the initial prognosis was utterly devastating. Doctors predicted he had only about 2 years to live.
It is entirely understandable that he fell into a deep depression, convinced his life and his intellectual ambitions were already over. You have to acknowledge the immense emotional and physical trauma that this kind of diagnosis brings.
Absolutely. It is impossible to overstate the initial despair. Yet, it was this tragedy that ironically provided the crucible for his scientific drive.
He had this profound reflection on it later, didn't he?
He did. He stated, "Before I got motor neuron disease, I was bored with life. But the prospect of an early death made me realize life was really worth living."
It was an immediate, critical perspective shift, that sense of limited time suddenly injecting urgency and purpose into his work.
And this sense of purpose was anchored in his personal life by Jane Wilde. His engagement to her in 1964 provided, in his own words, something to live for.
So that commitment to continue his studies and his life, despite the imminent threat of mortality, marked the beginning of his transformation.
From a brilliant but unmotivated student into the scientific force we remember.
And that urgency, spurred by the diagnosis, it quickly translated into scientific output. His formal scientific career truly commenced in 1966 when his PhD thesis, Properties of Expanding Universes, was approved.
This work firmly placed him in the rapidly developing field of general relativity and cosmology.
The central debate at the time was over the universe's origin, right? The Big Bang versus the steady state theory.
Exactly. Was there a definitive start, or was the universe eternal with continuous creation? Hawking's work was aimed squarely at mathematically cementing the Big Bang.
And he did this by collaborating with Roger Penrose, who had already established a foundational theorem regarding black holes.
Yes, Penrose had shown that matter collapsing past a certain point under general relativity would inevitably lead to a space-time singularity, a point of infinite density.
So Hawking's profound insight was to run the film backwards?
Essentially, yes. To reverse that logic and apply it to the entire universe. If the universe is expanding, as observations suggested, then running time backward must lead to that exact same singularity.
And this synthesis resulted in monumental work. He and Penrose published their landmark proof in 1970.
A proof which concluded that if the universe adhered to general relativity, and fit the established Friedman cosmological models, which describe a homogeneous, isotropic, expanding universe, then it must have originated as a singularity.
This finding was foundational.
Absolutely. It mathematically demonstrated that there must have been a beginning, a moment, when general relativity breaks down. This work instantly established Hawking as a leading cosmological figure.
So having helped establish the singularity of the universe, he then turned his focus to the singularities inside black holes.
Right. This led to his work with James Bardeen and Brandon Carter in the early 1970s, establishing the 4 laws of black hole mechanics. What they were essentially doing was drawing an analogy.
An analogy between the behavior of black holes
and the established laws of classical thermodynamics.
This effort also led to the articulation of the no-hair theorem. Now, this is the concept I find fascinating.
It is conceptually fascinating. It states that once a black hole has formed and settled down, it is completely defined by only 3 measurable external properties: its mass, its electrical charge, and its rotation.
And any details about the material that collapsed to form it, the so-called hair, are considered lost behind the event horizon.
Gone forever. But this analogy immediately sparked a critical intellectual tension with the physicist Jacob Bekenstein, a graduate student of John Wheeler,
who suggested the link wasn't just an analogy.
He suggested it should be taken literally. Bekenstein proposed that if the area of the event horizon, which never decreases according to Hawking's laws, was analogous to entropy, then a black hole must literally possess entropy.
And entropy is a measure of disorder or, crucially, information.
Right. But if a black hole has entropy, it must also have a temperature. And if it has a temperature, it must emit radiation.
Which was a radical idea because according to classical general relativity, a black hole should be perfectly black. Nothing should escape.
Exactly. This intellectual challenge directly spurred Hawking's next set of calculations.
This leads us to the critical breakthrough of 1974, the theoretical prediction of Hawking radiation.
His initial calculations, which were prompted by discussions in Moscow, were actually aimed at proving Bekenstein wrong. However, the mathematics surprised him.
The results contradicted his own previously postulated second law, the one stating that event horizons could never shrink.
Here's where it gets really interesting. What he discovered, using the principles of quantum field theory near the event horizon, was that black holes actually emit radiation.
So how does this happen?
It requires diving into the quantum realm, specifically the concept of virtual particles. In the vacuum of space, particle-antiparticle pairs constantly pop into existence and immediately annihilate each other.
These are virtual pairs because they only exist for a fleeting moment.
Right. But what happens when one of those pairs pops into existence right at the edge of a black hole's event horizon?
The gravitational pull is so immense
that sometimes one of the particles, so the antiparticle, falls into the black hole, and the other particle, the regular particle, escapes. Because the escaping particle cannot annihilate its partner, it appears to be emitted from the black hole itself.
And that escaping particle carries energy away. That energy is the Hawking radiation.
Precisely. The profound implication is that the black hole is losing mass and energy over time due to this quantum effect. It slowly evaporates.
So this links general relativity gravity and the black hole with quantum mechanics with virtual particles, which was the holy grail of physics then and now.
This discovery, announced in 1974, fundamentally redefined black holes from eternal prisons into finite objects with a lifespan. While the radiation is too weak to observe from astrophysical black holes today, the underlying theory was so elegant and necessary for consistency that it was widely accepted as a major theoretical breakthrough by the end of the decade.
And the scientific community reacted swiftly. Just weeks after the announcement, Hawking was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society, FRS,
making him one of the youngest fellows in history. That achievement speaks volumes about the immediate perceived magnitude of his work.
That same period also solidified his reputation for intellectual engagement and sometimes these mischievous wagers.
Yes, his long-standing intellectual sparring partner was the American physicist Kip Thorne.
Their first major bet, established long before 1990, concerned the X-ray source Cygnus X1. Was it definitively a black hole?
Hawking bet against it. He famously lost that bet in 1990. But he later characterized it as an insurance policy.
An insurance policy.
He said that by betting against black holes existing, he had protected himself emotionally. If they turned out not to exist, he would have won the bet, securing a consolation prize. If they did exist, his life's work would be validated.
So what did he have to pay up?
He paid Thorne a 1-year subscription to Private Eye magazine.
These friendly, high-stakes intellectual contests continued throughout his career, most notably evolving into what became known as the Black Hole War, focusing on the information paradox, which I'm sure we'll discuss later.
And amidst these groundbreaking discoveries, his career trajectory ascended rapidly. He was appointed reader in gravitational physics at Cambridge in 1975.
And then in 1979, he was elected to the Lucasian Chair of Mathematics.
To hold a post previously occupied by Newton at the age of 37, while already severely disabled, is arguably the highest academic honor available in the UK. As he settled into the Lucasian Chair, his approach to physics, it subtly shifted. He became increasingly confident in relying on his intellectual intuition to drive hypotheses, even if the math wasn't immediately ironclad.
This led to his famous quote to Kip Thorne.
"I would rather be right than rigorous." This marked a turn toward more speculative, almost philosophical theoretical work aimed at the biggest questions.
And that shift coincided directly with his quest for the universe's absolute origin. He began exploring this intensely after attending a major Vatican conference in 1981, which was focused on the relationship between science and creation.
That exploration led, in 1983, to his collaboration with Jim Hartle on the seminal no-boundary proposal, or the Hartle-Hawking state.
This was a radical attempt to use quantum mechanics to describe the universe before the Big Bang.
Exactly. The Hartle-Hawking state proposed that, when considering the very early universe, specifically before the Planck epoch, which is the earliest possible moment we can talk about time, the universe had no traditional boundary in space-time.
This is critical. According to classical general relativity, the Big Bang singularity is a boundary, a moment of infinite density where all the laws of physics collapse, which forces us to ask, what happened before the singularity?
And the no-boundary proposal sidestepped that impossible question entirely. It suggested that before the Planck epoch, time itself simply did not exist.
So the concept of a beginning or before is meaningless in the traditional chronological sense.
Precisely. To grasp this, we have to use the analogy they often employed. Imagine the initial singularity of the Big Bang as a sharp, definite point on a graph, a definite beginning. The no-boundary proposal replaces this with a region akin to the North Pole on Earth.
Okay, the North Pole. At the North Pole, you are at the northernmost point, and you cannot travel further north.
Right. Yet the pole itself is not a physical wall or an edge. It is not a boundary that requires a separate external creator to establish. It's simply the point where all lines of longitude converge and end.
So similarly, the Big Bang singularity is replaced by a condition where traveling backward in time simply becomes impossible before a certain epoch, but without needing a creation event or an external initial boundary.
Which is why the result carried such immense philosophical weight.
And what were the immediate philosophical implications Hawking drew from this?
He stated very clearly that the finding implied, if the universe has no boundaries but is self-contained, then God would not have had any freedom to choose how the universe began.
So if the laws of physics dictated the beginning entirely through quantum conditions, there was no room for divine intervention or choice in the act of creation.
That position fueled his public philosophical stance for the remainder of his life.
Now, on a much more practical note, in the early 1980s, the growing costs associated with his disability, specifically the need to fund his children's education and the extensive home care required, forced a different kind of ambition.
Financial stability. This need prompted his decision in 1982 to write a popular science book.
This was a risky move for a scientist of his stature, especially signing with a mass-market publisher like Bantam Books.
He received a significant advance, but the process was arduous. His initial drafts were far too dense and technical. His editor, Peter Guzzardi, was crucial. He pushed him relentlessly to explain complex ideas clearly.
Demanding that he remove all equations except for one.
All except we 2-3.
That rigorous editorial collaboration resulted in A Brief History of Time, From the Big Bang to Black Holes, published in 1988. And its success was, well, it was unprecedented in the world of popular science.
A true publishing phenomenon. It spent an astonishing, record-breaking 237 weeks over 4.5 years on the Sunday Times bestseller list.
And eventually sold an estimated 9 million copies globally.
The book propelled him into international celebrity status, far beyond the academic world. The media attention was intense. He was instantly recognizable.
I remember that Newsweek cover famously proclaiming him the master of the universe.
While the success brought significant financial rewards and recognition, it wasn't without consequence. The intense demands of celebrity, extensive international travel, endless interviews, and a constant stream of invitations began to severely limit the time he could dedicate to his students and traditional academic work.
And we must note the accompanying professional tension. Some colleagues did express resentment, feeling that the enormous attention and adulation he received was disproportionately inflated due to the pathos of his personal story.
rather than purely the complexity of his scientific output.
We must now delve into the defining aspect of his personal life, managing the relentless progression of motor neuron disease. Stephen Hawking's condition was rare, allowing him to survive with the disease for over 5 decades, though it slowly paralyzed him completely. And we approach this aspect of his life with appropriate sensitivity to the immense struggle he endured.
His physical decline was slow but constant, beginning in the late 1960s. He started using crutches, and his speech became noticeably slurred. What is truly astonishing is how his mind adapted as his body failed.
Particularly when he lost the ability to physically write equations.
Yes, he compensated by developing powerful internal visual methods, composing and manipulating equations entirely in terms of geometry in his head.
The complexity of this mental operation was so profound that Werner Israel, a close colleague, compared his process to Mozart composing an entire symphony without ever writing down a single note.
He was moving from symbolic algebra to pure conceptual geometry to solve the hardest problems in the universe.
But accompanying this mental brilliance was a fierce, almost obstinate independence and an unwillingness to compromise for his disability.
His first wife, Jane, documented this struggle extensively. He required much persuasion just to accept the necessity of using a wheelchair in the late 1960s.
And once he did, he made a point of embracing freedom.
He became notorious among his colleagues and staff for what was described as his wild driving in the electric chair, often deliberately driving over students' feet or using the chair like a bumper car. It speaks to a deep refusal to let the disease dictate his movements or his spirit.
The most critical and tragic turning point occurred in 1985. While visiting the CERN research facility in Geneva, he contracted life-threatening pneumonia.
His condition deteriorated rapidly and he required mechanical ventilation. The infection was so severe that doctors advised Jane that further treatment was pointless and asked her whether they should terminate life support.
She refused this advice.
She did. She insisted he be flown back to Cambridge, but the intervention required a permanent tracheotomy. The procedure saved his life, but it resulted in the complete and permanent loss of his remaining speech.
This loss necessitated round-the-clock professional nursing care, which, thanks to determined fundraising and private assistance from an American foundation, allowed him to remain at home rather than in a specialized NHS facility.
And this is where the technological intervention became inseparable from his identity. In 1986, he received the Equalizer, a computer program developed by Walter Wolters.
This system translated his physical movements into synthesized speech. Can you elaborate on the mechanism?
Initially, he used a switch pressed by his hand, but as the disease progressed, control was narrowed down to a single cheek muscle, which controlled an infrared sensor.
So by twitching that muscle, he could select words or letters from a bank of 2,500 to 3,000 phrases displayed on the screen.
And the device would then synthesize the selected language.
The immediate impact of regaining a voice, albeit synthesized, was immense. He later commented that he could communicate better now than before I lost my voice.
He felt he could construct perfectly phrased, precise sentences without the slurred impediments of his natural voice.
Interestingly, he retained the original American accent of the voice synthesizer for the rest of his life, identifying strongly with that unique electronic persona.
However, the disease continued its relentless march. By 2005, his reliance on the cheek muscle meant his communications slowed dramatically to about 1 word per minute.
This challenge led to crucial collaborations, notably with Intel researchers. They developed advanced predictive text software similar to modern smartphone keyboards, but specifically trained on his vast corpus of written work.
To anticipate his next word choices and speed up the communication process as much as possible.
Now, regarding his personal life, we must acknowledge the immense strain his condition and subsequent celebrity placed on those closest to him.
He married Jane Wilde in 1965, and they had 3 children. The requirement for 247 nursing care, coupled with his global fame and their differing views on faith, led to an unsustainable situation.
The strain resulted in his departure from the family home and his divorce from Jane in 1995. That same year, he married Elaine Mason, one of his nurses.
And during that second marriage, there were several years, particularly in the early 2000s, where both family members and staff expressed deep concern that he might be suffering physical abuse.
Police investigations were initiated multiple times, but they were eventually closed.
Because Hawking himself refused to make any formal complaint or cooperate, insisting he simply suffered frequent falls due to his condition.
Following his quiet divorce from Mason in 2006, he thankfully resumed closer relationships with his first family.
In the 1990s, he somewhat reluctantly accepted the role of a disability role model. He participated in fundraising efforts, signed the Charter for the Third Millennium on Disability.
And his narration for the Enlightenment segment of the 2012 Summer Paralympics opening ceremony was incredibly moving.
It was. Yet, as you mentioned, there was a palpable ambivalence. He desperately wished to be viewed purely as a scientist and to detach his intellectual identity from his illness.
Which sometimes drew criticism from advocates who felt he wasn't doing enough for the broader disability cause.
However, many felt that simply continuing his work at the highest possible intellectual level, despite the monumental physical challenges, served as an extraordinary, ongoing inspiration globally.
Moving into his later scientific career, what is perhaps most endearing about a scientist of his stature is his willingness to publicly admit when he was wrong.
Demonstrating a commitment to empirical truth over ego.
And this is clearly seen in two very famous scientific concessions.
The first, and perhaps most dramatic, relates back to the black hole war and the information paradox. As we discussed earlier, Hawking radiation suggests black holes evaporate.
The paradox arose from Hawking's earlier conclusion in the 1980s that when a black hole evaporates, the information about the matter that created it is irretrievably lost.
Which violates one of the most fundamental rules of quantum mechanics. Information can never be truly destroyed. It can be scrambled, but it must be recoverable in principle.
So that theoretical conflict, general relativity suggesting information loss, quantum mechanics demanding preservation, that is the information paradox.
Exactly. This tension led to the famous 1997 public bet with Kip Thorne and John Preskill, where Hawking bet that information loss was absolute.
He maintained that stance for years, but in 2004, he publicly conceded the bet, confirming that information must escape.
He called the alleged information loss his biggest blunder in 2014. His proposed solution, published in 2005, involved looking at alternative histories of the universe.
Suggesting the information is somehow encoded on the boundary of the black hole, the event horizon, and is preserved in a form of chaotic firewall or soft hair.
The second major concession concerned particle physics, specifically the Higgs boson. He had emphatically argued and bet against its existence, frequently engaging in heated public debates with Peter Higgs himself.
After the particle's definitive discovery at CERN in 2012, which confirmed the standard model of particle physics, Hawking immediately conceded.
He did, stating that Peter Higgs thoroughly deserved the Nobel Prize, which he received the following year. It shows that even a mind as brilliant as Hawking's was prepared to follow the evidence wherever it led, regardless of his prior commitments.
In terms of new theoretical work during this late period, starting around 2006, he collaborated significantly with Thomas Hertog and Jim Hartle on the theory of top-down cosmology.
This work was essentially the next iteration of the no-boundary proposal. It stepped away from seeking one unique initial state for the universe and instead proposed a quantum superposition of many possible histories.
And the key, highly speculative idea is that the present state of the universe selects the past from those multiple histories.
Right.
How does that relate to a profound cosmological question like fine-tuning?
The fine-tuning question asks why the fundamental constants of nature, gravity, electromagnetism, and so on seem perfectly calibrated for the evolution of intelligent life.
And top-down cosmology suggests that the universe did not start with a unique, improbable configuration chosen by chance.
But that our existence today imposes boundary conditions that force us to be in one of the histories compatible with life. It flips the arrow of causality in a fascinating way, offering a solution without needing an appeal to the concept of a creator.
Beyond pure physics, Hawking dedicated a tremendous amount of intellectual energy toward addressing existential risk for humanity, and his views were always strong and uncompromising.
His most discussed warning concerned the development of superintelligent artificial intelligence. He feared that while AI could be the biggest event in human history, it might also be the last.
He warned that the risk wasn't necessarily malice, but what is often called optimization risk.
Exactly. The problem of a superintelligent system successfully pursuing a goal that is not aligned with human values, and in doing so, consuming all necessary resources.
An AGI might be so competent at its task, say, maximizing clean energy output, that it views humanity as a distraction.
Or an inefficient use of planetary resources, leading to our accidental demise. He stressed that humanity needs to ensure that the competence of AI remains aligned with human goals.
He also warned of the necessity of wealth redistribution to manage the inevitable economic inequality created by machines replacing human labor.
And he believed that life on Earth faces numerous existential risks, from nuclear conflict to engineered viruses and, critically, climate change. This led to his strong advocacy for spaceflight.
He viewed space colonization of additional planets as necessary for the long-term survival of the species.
Stating that a single planet-wide disaster is almost inevitable within the next 1,000 years, and that our only insurance policy is to establish self-sustaining colonies elsewhere before then.
And perhaps the most paradoxical view from a man who spent his life studying the cosmos was his strong advice against seeking contact with extraterrestrial life.
He warned that if highly intelligent aliens were to visit Earth, the outcome might be similar to when Christopher Columbus landed in America, which he noted didn't turn out well for the Native Americans.
His logic was clear. Any species capable of interstellar travel would likely be vastly more powerful and technologically advanced than us.
And they might not necessarily view our survival as a priority.
Shifting to philosophy and religion in 2011, Hawking made the controversial statement that philosophy is dead,
arguing that modern philosophers had failed to keep pace with the massive advancements in modern science, leaving the important questions of existence and knowledge solely in the hands of physicists.
This aggressive stance was deeply rooted in his lifelong and very public atheism, while he had used the term God metaphorically in a brief history of time.
In the famous concluding phrase about possibly knowing the mind of God, yes.
He later felt compelled to clarify that metaphorical usage. How did he clarify his meaning?
He explained that knowing the mind of God meant knowing everything that God would know if there were a God, which there isn't.
He consistently maintained that the concept of an afterlife was a fairy story for people afraid of the dark, believing the human brain simply ceases to function when its physical components fail.
His final statement on the matter was definitive. No one created the universe, and no one directs our fate.
Despite the profound scientific gravity of his work and the extreme personal difficulties he endured, Stephen Hawking became a beloved figure in popular culture,
reaching an audience far wider than almost any theoretical physicist before him. He transitioned into a genuine pop culture icon.
His wide-ranging reach was remarkable. He appeared, for instance, in Star Trek: The Next Generation, playing a holographic version of himself.
In a game of poker with historical greats like Sir Isaac Newton and Albert Einstein.
His distinctive, copyrighted synthesized voice was featured in the Pink Floyd song Keep Talking, and he guest starred in animated classics like The Simpsons and live-action comedies like The Big Bang Theory.
And his life story itself was adapted into major biographical works, most notably the 2014 film The Theory of Everything,
where Eddie Redmayne played him in an Oscar-winning performance. Crucially, the film utilized Hawking's actual copyrighted voice, making his presence deeply authentic.
Politically, he held strong, progressive viewpoints and was a consistent supporter of the Labor Party. He was a vocal campaigner for nuclear disarmament, fully supported stem cell research, and was an ardent advocate for universal health care.
And internationally, he was highly critical of conflicts, notably calling the 2003 invasion of Iraq a war crime.
On the crucial issue of the UK National Health Service, his support was exceptionally passionate and personal.
He emphasized repeatedly that he simply could not have survived into his 70s without the extraordinary dedication and services provided by the NHS.
His concern over the future of the NHS was profound. He feared privatization, warning that extracting profit from the system would inevitably make healthcare more expensive and inadequate.
And he openly criticized the government for cutting funding and undermining staff morale, believing that the public structure was essential for everyone, especially those with long-term, expensive conditions like his own.
Furthermore, in 2016 and 2017, he became a prominent, outspoken critic of climate denialism, targeting Donald Trump's policies in particular.
He offered a stark, vivid warning about environmental stewardship.
He stated that the reversal of climate protections could cause environmental damage so severe that it would ultimately turn Earth into a Venus-like planet, with atmospheric temperatures rising to 250 degrees Celsius and raining sulfuric acid.
He was using a potent scientific analogy to stress the urgency of the climate crisis.
He absolutely was.
Stephen Hawking died peacefully at his home in Cambridge on 14 March 2018. He was 76, having lived an incredible 55 years after receiving his initial 2-year prognosis for motor neurone disease.
His global stature was reaffirmed by his final resting place, Following a private funeral, his ashes were interred during a major service of Thanksgiving at Westminster Abbey.
He was buried in the nave between the graves of two other monumental figures in scientific history, Sir Isaac Newton and Charles Darwin.
Incredible honor.
And his memorial stone carries an enormous scientific significance. Inscribed upon it are the words, "Here lies what was mortal" of Stephen Hawking, 1942-2018, alongside his most famed equation.
The Bekenstein-Hawking entropy formula.
That formula, as you correctly point out, is far more than just a piece of math. It is the ultimate expression of his unifying ambition.
It relates the entropy of a black hole to the area of its event horizon. By establishing this relationship, he effectively linked concepts from general relativity, quantum mechanics, and classical thermodynamics into a single, elegant framework.
And specifically, he confirmed and established the constant of proportionality, the fraction 1/4 in the formula, which Jacob Bekenstein had previously conjectured.
That final resting place, nestled between the giants of classical mechanics and evolutionary biology, with his formula inscribed above, perfectly encapsulates his legacy.
A physicist who used the power of his mind alone to find the deep connections underlying reality, pushing the boundaries of what was mathematically or physically possible.
A profound narrative of intellectual triumph over physical limits.
We have completed this extensive exploration of Stephen Hawking's life, tracing his trajectory from an unmotivated Oxford student given 2 years to live to a global scientific celebrity.
Who used technology to speak one word a minute, yet still managed to unify the concepts of cosmology and quantum mechanics through sheer intellect.
So what does this all mean for us today? We've looked closely at the life of a man who wrote bestsellers and challenged the fundamental laws of the universe,
Proving that relentless intellectual curiosity and determination can be a force unto itself, defining identity far more powerfully than any physical ailment.
and even after his death, his influence continues. His final research studies, published posthumously, such as the paper discussing a smooth exit from eternal inflation and black hole entropy and soft hair,
They confirm that his quest to understand the universe's origin and fate continued right up until the very end.
considering his advice that we must urgently colonize space to ensure humanity's survival and that the unchecked acceleration of artificial intelligence is an existential threat, the sheer depth of his concern for our long-term future on Earth is striking.
And it remains a powerful call for global scientific and political responsibility.
If the Bekenstein-Hawking entropy formula mathematically links gravity, quantum theory, and thermodynamics, does this mathematical unity not powerfully suggest a single fundamental structure to reality that transcends even the human definitions of existence and time?
Something for you to ponder as you continue your own journey of exploration and intellectual discovery.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.